I've lived in Columbus, Ohio, my entire life, and for 68 years, I've known the rhythm of winter, the quiet hush of freshly fallen snow, the crunch of it under boots, and the way the gray sky presses down over the city. After Harold passed 10 years ago, the holidays became my responsibility. Every December, I find myself pulling down boxes from the attic, dusting off ornaments he and I collected over decades, and setting the table just as we did together. Some days, it feels like I'm carrying more than just holiday decorations. I carry his memory, our family's expectations, and a stubborn hope that Christmas can still be peaceful. My daughters are both grown now. Shannon has always been reliable, showing up early, helping me prepare the house. Her presence steady and comforting. Marissa, on the other hand, has been a different story. 4 years in a row, she and Darren have managed to turn what should be a day of joy into a day of tension. Their voices rise too quickly. Complaints start before anyone sits down. And somehow, every year, it feels like I'm tiptoeing through a storm I can't escape. This year, as I dusted the ornaments and straightened the garlands, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The living room smelled faintly of pine, the smell from the tree I had carried home alone from the lot, its branches sticky with sap. I remembered last year, when Marissa criticized the ham before anyone had a chance to taste it, and Darren's sharp words cut through the air like glass. I'd stood frozen, watching my grandchildren shrink in their chairs, trying to make excuses for their behavior in my own head. Despite it all, I continued. I wrapped presents carefully, hung stockings with each grandchild's name, and set the table with our best dishes. I even baked pies from scratch, remembering Harold's pride when he helped me make the crust for the first one decades ago. Every detail mattered. Every memory clung to the hope that maybe this year would be different. As I arranged the last plate and straightened the silverware, I reminded myself quietly that no matter what happened, I had prepared, and I would face the day as I always had. And yet, deep inside, I felt the tension creeping forward, the anticipation that Marissa and Darren's arrival would bring the familiar storm back into my living room. The first snow of the season drifted past the window as I stood back and surveyed my work, knowing that the moment of reckoning was only hours away. Every year, as the calendar edged closer to December, I felt the memory of the previous Christmases pressing down on me. The first time it started, it was subtle enough that I tried to dismiss it. Marissa arrived late, her coat slung over one arm, Darren trailing behind with an impatient sigh. The gifts I had saved for on my modest retirement income were laid out neatly under the tree. And as the children tore into them, Marissa complained aloud that I had spent more on Shannon's kids. Darren nodded along, muttering that I was always playing favorites. I remember my throat tightening, a lump forming in my chest, while the grandchildren froze mid-laugh, uncertain which side to take. The second year, they pushed the boundaries further. They arrived 2 hours late without a call, leaving the ham cold and the green bean casserole congealed. Darren asked, in front of everyone, if I could lend them money, thousands of dollars I simply didn't have. I explained gently that I was on a fixed income and could not. Marissa muttered under her breath that I was stingy, and Darren erupted, shouting that I would rather spend on Shannon's family than his own. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the wreath on the front porch fell to the ground. Christmas ended abruptly, the air heavy with resentment and hurt, and I was left standing amid plates and spilled drinks, wondering why I had let it happen again. By the third year, I thought perhaps I would have learned my lesson. I had baked pies from scratch, set the table just so, and tried to prepare a warm, welcoming home Yet from the moment Marissa and Darren walked through the door, the tension returned. Marissa criticized the ham before anyone had taken a bite, laughed at the store-bought pie I had spent hours preparing, and told the grandchildren to limit themselves on the green bean casserole. Darren joined in, tossing sharp remarks that left the children shrinking in their chairs. By dessert, they had packed up the kids and left without a word of thanks, leaving me with a kitchen full of dishes and a heart heavy with frustration. Each year, I told myself it was worth it for the grandchildren, that they should have memories of Christmas with their grandmother. Yet standing in the empty, silent living room afterward, I questioned whether that love justified the pain I endured. Their pattern was clear, and the emotional toll was evident in the children, who grew more withdrawn, and in me, who felt older and more fragile with each passing year. As I straightened the tablecloth one last time that evening, I realized that this year could not be like the last three. I needed a plan, a way to preserve the joy of Christmas without surrendering my peace. The decision I would face in the hours ahead was already forming in my mind, as certain as the winter wind blowing against the windows. I moved through my house with a quiet determination, pulling down the Christmas boxes from the attic one by one. Each ornament brought a memory, some joyful, some bittersweet. The wooden angel Harold had carved years ago rested carefully in my hands, its delicate wings still intact. I set it aside with care, thinking about the first Christmas after he passed. The house felt empty then, yet I had pressed on, determined to keep the traditions alive. This year, I told myself, I would prepare with intention, not just habit. The tree went up first, its branches sticky from the fresh sap, the smell filling the living room like a gentle reminder of winters past. I untangled strings of lights, checking each bulb twice, then draped them carefully around the branches. Each ornament followed, not randomly, but in the order Harold had always liked. A glass snowflake from Shannon's second grade, a faded bulb from the first Christmas we bought our house. All of it was a tapestry of memory and care. I wrapped the presents meticulously, every ribbon tied neatly, every tag placed so that even the youngest grandchild could find their name. As I arranged the table, I thought about Marissa and Darren. 4 years of tension had taught me to anticipate their behavior. Their complaints and arguments had become a predictable storm, and I had learned to brace for it. Though my heart still tightened at the thought, I made a mental list of boundaries I would test, gently seating arrangements, the pace of the meal, the placement of gifts. I reminded myself that preparation could be a shield, even if it could not control every word they would say. Later, Judith stopped by, carrying a plate of her famous cranberry salad. We exchanged pleasantries, but her eyes caught the tension etched in mine. She took my hand and said softly, "Eleanor, you can prepare, you can plan, but remember, your peace is yours to protect. You don't have to give them the power to ruin your day." Her words resonated deeply. I nodded, feeling the weight of my resolve strengthen. I would prepare for the storm, yes, but this year I would also test the waters, plan contingencies, and finally protect what was mine, my home, my holiday, and my calm. With the house ready, the tree lit, and the pies cooling on the counter, I stood back for a moment, imagining the day ahead. I knew the storm would come, as it always did, but I also knew I was ready to meet it differently this year. The first footsteps at the door would soon tell me if my preparations were enough. By 6:30, I could hear the crunch of tires on the driveway, and my chest tightened. I had set the table with our best dishes, the silver polished, the napkins folded just so. Shannon had arrived earlier, her calm presence a small anchor amid the storm I knew was coming. I took a deep breath and reminded myself to stay steady, to let the preparations speak for themselves. Marissa and Darren arrived nearly an hour late, arguing before they even reached the door. Their voices carried across the driveway, sharp and loud, carrying complaints about traffic, the weather, and my choices in holiday decorations. The grandchildren followed behind, eyes down, clinging to their mother and uncle. Unsure how to navigate the familiar chaos, Shannon shot me a look across the room, the kind that said, "Here we go again." As soon as they entered, the tension thickened. Marissa's voice was sharp, pointing out small faults: the angle of the Christmas tree, the placement of the silverware, the timing of the meal. Darren leaned back in his chair, muttering complaints about the portions, the way I had arranged the table, and even the lighting in the living room. Every word seemed calculated to provoke, to unsettle. The grandchildren fidgeted nervously, unsure where to look, and I could feel the weight of their discomfort pressing on me. I offered them gentle smiles, hoping to reassure them, but it felt like an impossible task. Shannon attempted to smooth over the tension, speaking quietly to Darren, trying to calm his voice, reminding him that we were all here to enjoy the evening. Her effort was quiet but earnest, a counterbalance to the storm that Marissa and Darren brought with them. I passed the mashed potatoes carefully, setting each bowl with deliberate calm, trying to maintain some semblance of order. The pies, golden and fragrant, waited at the center of the table, a symbol of effort and tradition. Every minute that passed seemed to stretch longer, the clash of voices undercutting the warmth I had hoped to create. I reminded myself that this had been coming for years, that the chaos was predictable, yet it still stung in new ways. I had prepared, yes, but I also knew that preparation alone would not protect the holiday from the sharp edges of their behavior. The storm had arrived, and the first exchanges had set the pattern for the rest of the evening. I took a steadying breath and straightened my shoulders, knowing the moment I had long anticipated was only just beginning. The moment came sooner than I expected. Marissa picked up her fork and wrinkled her nose at the ham, commenting loudly that it looked dry. Her words hit the room like ice, and I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Darren immediately jumped in, leaning forward across the table with his sharp tone, accusing me of always taking Shannon's side. His voice rose over the clatter of silverware, each syllable sharpening the tension that had been building since they arrived. The grandchildren froze mid-bite, their wide eyes flicking between us as if searching for a safe space that didn't exist. Shannon reached for Darren's arm, whispering calmly, trying to lower the volume, but he shrugged her hand away. Every instinct I had trained myself to follow, to stay calm. To keep the peace seemed suddenly inadequate. My stomach churned, and I realized the patience I had clung to for years had run its course. I felt the plates tremble as Darren gestured, his elbow knocking against a serving dish. Marissa rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath about the green beans, and the room's energy shifted from uncomfortable to charged, almost electric. Every comment felt deliberate, every word meant to provoke a reaction. And for the first time in years, I decided I would give them one. I slammed my hand down on the table so hard that the silverware rattled, drawing a sharp, startled silence from everyone around me. My voice, steady and firm, cut through the tension. Enough. Get out of my house. It was simple, direct, and final. The words hung in the air, heavier than any holiday decoration I had ever hung, and I could see the shock register on Marissa's face and the flush of anger rising on Darren's. Shannon's eyes widened, but I could see relief hidden beneath her concern. The grandchildren's mouths fell open slightly, the fear and uncertainty lingering. Yet there was a flicker of something else, a recognition that someone had finally drawn a line. Marissa opened her mouth, probably to argue, but no words came. Darren's chair scraped loudly as he pushed back, the air thick with disbelief and frustration. They both stood, grabbing coats, muttering threats under their breath, and stormed out. The door slammed behind them, and the wreath on the front door shook violently. Silence fell over the room, heavy and almost deafening, yet different from the tension before. It was a silence that carried finality, one that marked the end of the old patterns I had been enduring for too long. I sank back into my chair slowly, hands still resting on the table, feeling the rush of adrenaline fade and a strange sense of clarity settle in. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of authority, the empowerment that comes from refusing to be pushed beyond my limits. The storm had hit its peak, and in that moment, I understood that the power to protect my peace had always been mine. I looked across at Shannon, who gave me a quiet nod, her relief barely contained, and I realized that the path forward was now clear. The storm had passed, but the decisions that would follow were just beginning. I told Shannon what I had decided. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded, steady and unwavering. "Mom, you've done enough. You don't owe anyone another holiday under these conditions," she said. Her words, simple and sincere, cut through the guilt that had lodged in my chest for years. I felt a measure of relief wash over me, tempered by the gravity of what I was about to do. Cancel Christmas at our house and seriously consider selling the family home. I walked through the rooms, my hands brushing against the tablecloths and polished silver. Each item I had carefully prepared now felt like a testament not just to tradition, but to endurance under duress. Neighbors passing by would peek in, curious about the unusual quiet. Some sent over greetings or a nod of concern, unaware that beneath the calm, a quiet revolution was taking place in my heart. The thought of selling the house both terrified and liberated me. Every corner held memories of Harold, of the children growing up, of laughter and love, but also of conflict and tension I had silently absorbed. Shannon sat beside me, folding her hands in her lap, offering support without judgment. "You're not abandoning anyone," she said. "You're reclaiming your home, your peace. And that's not selfish?" I began to imagine the possibilities: a smaller, manageable apartment, a space I could truly call my own, where the holidays could be joyful again without the looming dread of Marissa and Darren's presence. I made a list of potential real estate agents, noting small details about each property I had seen in the neighborhood. Even as I planned, I felt a sense of clarity settle over me, as if drawing boundaries in my mind had already begun to reshape the life I wanted to lead. I knew the next steps would involve careful decisions, and that the reactions from family and neighbors would vary. But for the first time, I felt confident that I was not reacting out of anger, fear, or guilt. I was taking control, and with control came the knowledge that the coming days, no matter how they unfolded, would belong to me. The next morning, I would begin the process of moving forward, setting the foundation for the change I had long needed. Boxes lined the living room floor, each one filled with fragments of a life I had shared with Harold and my children. I wrapped ornaments carefully, tucking them in tissue paper, each one a memory I wasn't ready to let go of. The nativity set Harold had carved so many winters ago was placed on top of the tallest box, a reminder that some traditions were worth preserving. Photographs, quilts, and old holiday decorations followed, each handled with care as I sorted what would come with me to my new apartment. The move to a smaller space felt strange. At first, no grand dining room, no tall windows to watch the snow fall, no familiar corners where arguments had once echoed. Yet as I arranged my things in the new living room, a sense of calm settled over me. I could finally breathe without anticipating the next storm, and I realized that my peace was worth more than the house itself. I set boundaries for visits, explaining to Shannon and the grandchildren what this new space meant. No yelling, no interruptions, only respect and shared joy. I felt liberated, empowered, and reflective, finally understanding that traditions could live on without sacrificing my well-being. With the apartment settled and my heart lighter, I turned to plan the first Christmas here, ready to make it truly mine. The morning light filtered through the small windows of my new apartment, casting a warm glow over the modest tree I had carefully decorated. Shannon arrived first, carrying a casserole and her usual calm energy. The grandchildren followed, their excitement undiminished despite the smaller space. I watched them move around, setting the table and arranging napkins, and felt a quiet pride. Each child had a role. Sophie checked the seating chart. Dylan handled the silverware. Caleb arranged the plates, and little Elsie set out the cookies. For the first time in years, I did not hover over every task. I guided gently when needed, letting them take responsibility. And for the first time, Christmas felt collaborative rather than chaotic. Marissa and Darren were absent, respecting the boundaries I had set, and their absence brought a peace that had been missing for far too long. We shared the meal with laughter and light conversation. The grandchildren were engaged, attentive, and joyful, and Shannon's steady presence reminded me that family did not require constant struggle to be meaningful. For the first time, I understood that traditions could be preserved and redefined, and that joy could exist without tension or compromise. As the meal ended, I looked around the room, feeling a sense of balance and contentment I hadn't known in years. The days following the new Christmas settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I returned to my quilting circle on Thursdays. The familiar chatter and laughter, a gentle reminder of the life I had almost neglected. Volunteering at the local library on Saturdays gave me purpose beyond the walls of my apartment. I finally allowed myself to pursue hobbies I had set aside for decades. Each stitch and each page a small reclaiming of time for myself. At the same time, the grandchildren adapted to their new responsibilities. Sophie checked homework diligently. Dylan learned to fold laundry correctly. Caleb took pride in setting the table, and Elsie delighted in organizing toys. I guided them without doing everything for them, teaching them to take ownership while respecting my own limits. Even Darren, though still awkward, began pitching in occasionally, a small shift that hinted at the possibility of change. Through it all, I felt a sense of empowerment and autonomy that had been absent for so long. Traditions could live on, but they no longer controlled me. Peace and joy were now rooted in boundaries, in knowing that I could mentor without sacrificing my own well-being. As I sipped my evening tea, I realized that this new way of living was not just sustainable, it was transformative, and the coming holidays would be celebrated differently, on my terms.